Happy Friday, everyone. I hope you're having a nice day wherever you are. I was just sorry I'm a little bit late getting started. Just got home from work late, uh, and I am sleepy and hungry. So we'll see how many sections we do, if we do one or two. This one's kind of meaty. Coon clauses, though, in the next lesson aren't too bad. The ablative of specification, also not too bad. We will not do gerund and gerundive this time. I can absolutely guarantee that. So we'll do one or two sections today. So this one's a little bit meaty just because the words are intense. The subjunctive of characteristic or description. And then also the predicate accusative, but that's not weird or difficult, really. So let me understand what he means by the subjunctive of characteristic or description. Another term for it is the relative clause of characteristic. And the reason that it's called that is because it is generally introduced by a relative pronoun who, whom, whose. Fun times. So, similar to the subjunctive of result, I do this with the result that, or I work so hard with the result that, blah, blah, blah. There's also a subjunctive in clauses of characteristic or description. So let's just look at an example. Maybe that'll make it easier. Quis est qui suum domum non amet? Who is it who does not love his own home? But if we look at amet, we can tell that's the present subjunctive, not indicative, even though in English we translate it as indicative quite frequently. So the idea is that who is it who is the sort of person who doesn't love his home? It's a general description of a person, not a specific individual you have in mind. So when a relative clause is referring to a general person and not a specific individual, is probably setting up a relative clause of characteristic. What kind of person doesn't love his own home? That's actually probably a nice way of rendering the idea in English. Who is the sort of person who wouldn't love his own home? So you might see quis or quid, these interrogative. I'm kind of looking out the window because my coworker's cleaning up some trash at the place across the street, and I'm kind of like wondering if you might need some help. But he didn't call me, and Punch is busy, so I guess I won't offer. All right. Another common way of setting it up is a verb to be without a specified subject and then the relative pronoun. Erant qui hoc facere nolent. There were those who didn't want to do this. Or there were those who were unwilling to do this. Fudge is being carried, thrown outside. Good. So when we're talking about this general group of people, there were some who didn't want to do this. Number 3, tu non es qui amicus tradas. You are not he who would betray his friends. You are not the person who would betray his friends. You're not the kind of person who would betray his friends. This is how you get that idea in Latin. Another way of introducing it, so we've got these relative and interrogative words. We have simply the verb to be without a set subject. Also verbs like nothing, mount words might introduce a subjunctive or characteristic. Nihil video quod timeam. There is nothing I see which I should fear. I see nothing I would fear. I see nothing to fear. There's nothing of the characteristic that would make me afraid. That's the subjunctive of characteristic. So a lot of different ways to express it in English, and a fairly broad range of interpretation and way of expressing it. But that is the subjunctive of characteristic, the relative clause of characteristic, because it's always going to be introduced by a relative pronoun followed by a subjunctive. So each of these examples contain a descriptive relative clause which tells what kind of person or thing the antecedent is, instead of giving you definite information about the antecedent. To express this thought, the subjunctive is used. A relative clause that merely states a fact and does not describe the antecedent uses the indicative. So we'll compare these two sentences here. Caesar est qui nos ducet. Caesar is the man who is leading us, indicative. Caesar est qui nos ducat. So you'll see the difference between ducat and ducat, subjunctive. Caesar is the type of person who leads us. Caesar is the one who should lead us. Caesar is the type of man we need to lead us. So that's the idea. You use a demonstrative pronoun and a relative. These are the men who did this, and these are not the men who did this, indicative, indicative. These are not the men to do this. These are not the type of men who should do this, blah, blah, blah. Use the subjunctive instead of the indicative. Caesar's not the hero we need, but he's the one we got. Yeah, exactly. He's the sort of hero we should have. All right, subjunctive of characteristics. So just the definition again, a relative clause with a subjunctive to describe the antecedent, called the subjunctive of characteristic or description. That, I think, made sense, and that had a lot of examples for us. Why are we... Oh, we switched topics. I was like, these sentences don't have relative clause of characteristic. All right, the second item, a small item, predicate accusative. So we're used to predicate nominative. Caesar is a consul. Caesar est consul. The predicate, the second part of the sentence, also has a nominative because you have a verb to be. However, you can also have a predicate accusative, which means, well, another way of referring to it is the double accusative. So, for example, in sentence 1, Romani Caesarem consulum fecurent. The Romans made Caesar consul. So, they're both objects of the verb. They refer to one another. They're both in the accusative. Romans made Caesar a consul. So when you have a verb meaning made in this sense, or to call, I call my husband Punch, husband and Punch would both be the accusative because you're calling one object another word, or making one object another thing, choosing one thing as something, showing something as something. I choose my best friend as maid of honor. There would be no as in the Latin. You would simply have two accusatives. So the rule, when you have these two accusative verbs of making, choosing, calling, showing, and the like, may take a predicate accusative along with the direct object. A way to backwards think about it In the passive voice, the two accusatives would be nominative. So-and-so is chosen as something. Those would both be nominative. So-and-so is made consul, both nominative. So commonly used verbs creo, creari, creavi, creatum, to create, which they're translating as choose, which is an interesting translation. I would not. But anyway, I dub thee jester. Exactly. You would use the verb nomino for that. I nominate thee, I name thee jester. Appello and voco also use call. And then facio if you're making somebody a certain position. So not too bad. Let's just look at number 2 for an example of that relative clause again. Erant itinera duo quibus helvetii domo discedere possit. There were 2 roads by which the Helvetii would be able to depart from home. So it's not saying these were the 2 roads they used, but simply there were 2 roads that are the type that could be used to leave. So you can get a lot of meaning out of this Latin subjunctive. I love it. Number 7, that's another nice little sentence. Germani non ii sunt qui adventum Caesaris vereantur. The Germans are not those who would fear the approach of Caesar. The Germans are not the type who would fear. So again, that is using a demonstrative ii, the verb to be, and then the relative pronoun. So that ii sunt qui is a really standard formula for there are or they are the sort who. All right. Good work so far. That did not take very long, so we're going to do cum and ablative of specification because neither of these are too tricky. But first, I want to take us back to the ablative absolute. This is where we use a participle, oftentimes the perfect passive participle, and a noun, both in the ablative case, to provide more information about what's going on in the sentence. It might be a causal statement, because such and such happened. It might be a temporal statement, when such and such happened. It might be concessive, although such and such thing happened, main clause. A second way to express that same idea that you can with the ablative absolute is a cum clause. So cum, when we've seen it before, has always meant with. I go somewhere with somebody, cum, whatever, aliquo. But the conjunction cum, when it's not followed by an ablative immediately, but is in fact followed by an entire other clause, can mean one of our subordinate clauses: temporal when, causal since, concessive although. When a cum is followed by the indicative, so cum, subject, indicative verb, it's temporal. When something happened. It's got that hardiness to it, so it's indicative. When a cum is followed by a subjunctive, cum, subject, subjunctive verb, it could be either temporal or causal or concessive. So that's one where you have to be really cautious. But if you use the verb sense, which can be either causal or temporal, you can get away with a lot. So, let's just read through their examples here. Caesarem vidi tum cum in Gallia eram. I saw Caesar then when I was in Gaul. Because we have the word tum, then, we know that cum is going to be temporal. It gives us the extra information we need. Number 2, Caesar in eos impetum fecit cum pacem peterent. Sorry, just a second note for number 1. Eram is in the indicative for temporal. It's all in the past. We know what happened. It's indicative. So Caesar made an attack against them when they were seeking peace, although they were seeking peace. Since they were seeking peace, maybe if Caesar didn't want peace, if he wanted to continue the war, like in that Star Trek movie we just watched, and so you set up this assassination attempt because you want to keep the war going, it could be because they were seeking peace, Caesar attacked them. It just depends upon how you want to make Caesar look. How crazy do you want Caesar to be? He could have thought they were in ambush. So when they were seeking peace, Caesar attacked them thinking they were trying to do something else. We don't know. That 6 movie. There we go. That one. Hoc erat difficile cum pauci sine vulneribus essent. This was a difficult thing, since, when, because, although, few were without wounds. I don't know the context of that sentence, so I don't know which way to translate cum. Decide on your own. When they had fled, when the first ranks had fled, tamen, nevertheless. So because we have a tamen in the main clause, we know that cum is going to be although. Although the front ranks had fled, nevertheless, the remainder stood bravely. Okay. You choose the tense of the subjunctive based on the tense of the main verb and the relative relationship of the clause with the main verb. The underlying principle is that when cum states a fact and fixes the time, use the indicative. When cum describes the circumstances, you use the subjunctive because it gives a subordinate clause with unnecessary but useful information. It might be time, it might be concession, it might be cause. It means when, since, or although. When it's indicative, any of them when subjunctive. All right. And now the second thing, real quick. This is about the ablative case. Another thing you can do with the ablative case. So, oppidum erat parva magnitudine, sed magnum multitudine hominum. So, the town was small in respect to size, but great in respect to population of men. So, you heard me translate magnitudine and multitudine with the phrase in respect to. So sometimes the ablative is used with another adjective to give the circumstance for which that is true. I am short in respect to Punch, so I could put short in the nominative feminine describing me, and then Punch in the ablative, but I am tall in respect to our cat. So tall would again be a feminine adjective, nominative, and cat would be ablative. Because sometimes you just need to provide, in what sense is that true? It's called qualifying your adjectives. Sometimes things are objectively red, blue, whatever. But when you're dealing with size or virtue, it can really have some need for comparison, right? You're good in what? So number 2, homo erat corpore infirmus, sed validus animo. The man was weak in body, but strong in courage. So again, just explaining in what way that makes sense. Are you just overall weak, or are you strong? So you can translate it as in something or in respect to something. So ablative of specification, the ablative is used to denote in what respect something is true. You don't use any prepositions with that. He's throwing a few idioms at us here. Aliquem certiorum facinum, to inform someone, to make someone more certain, to let them know. Certior fiere, to become informed, to become more certain. Dare iter, to give right away, to allow to pass, to give the journey, let them go. Obsides inter se dare, to give hostages among themselves to each other. A very common practice in the ancient world. Let's just do number 3 real fast. Caesar cum interiore Gallia esset, tamen de Helvetiorum conciliis certior fiebat. So we have a tamen in the main clause. So the cum we're going to translate as although. So although Caesar was esset, more quickly in Gaul. I'm gonna look that up real quick. I guess it's true, Russ. Sometimes colors are a little bit more subjective, depending on the viewer's eyes, as it were. Their trained palate. I don't know that I trust myself on my translation of Citeriore. So I'm just double checking that. Okay, so it's that. Okay, never mind. It can mean a few things. So it can mean either sooner or nearer. So probably related to Quito quickly. So although Caesar was nearer, it's referring to Gaul. Nearer Gaul. It's being used simply as a description of which part of Gaul he was in. He was in nearer Gaul. There you go. Although Caesar was in Citerior Gaul, nevertheless, he became more certain, he became better informed about the plans of the Helvetii. So, there, good brain. Let's look at number 10. Illud bellum tum incepit, cum Caesar fuit consul. So we have a tum and a cum. So tum shall mean then, because we have it, and also because the verb is in the indicative, we know that cum is when. So that war then began when Caesar was consul. Very nice. All right. Next time we'll do gerund and gerundive, which is a lot of people find it very tricky, gerunds and gerundives. Part of the reason is because English doesn't have gerundives, so it makes it a little bit harder. My brain's broken, so I never had too much trouble with it, but I have seen much confusion. So we'll do gerunds and gerundivs next week, and then we'll think about AO and doing indirect statements. It kind of depends how we feel after talking about gerunds and gerundivs. So, but we are nearing the end. Maybe 4 more weeks or so. I know the gerund from English, but I have no idea what the gerundiv is. Yep. You're welcome, Bushido-san. I hope you had a good day too. And yes, the gerundiv is like an adjective. So it's like if you take a gerund and make it describe things, then it's a gerundiv. But we'll talk about that next time. Everybody have a lovely weekend. I will see you Friday. Because I think I'm kind of pushing for a movie night instead of streaming Golden Sun. And Punch is nodding. He has resigned himself to his fate. So anyway,